What's good, ladies and gentlemen? So welcome to SK Wealth Academy podcast number 119. Financial news of the horrific and parasitic for the week of July 24th to July 27th, to July 31st. So in this podcast, I'm going to talk about how it's necessary to digest news outside the biased lens of a national perspective. Because if you are unable to do so, and you listen to such arguments, or you yourself propel such arguments forward as, you don't live here, so you don't know what's going on, that is a specious argument devoid of intellect. And it's an argument that is going to cause a lot of people to lose everything if that's the argument they apply to their filters to digest financial news and to separate the wheat from the chaff. But before I get started on that, because I am going to discuss that more in depth, I'm going to start with the so-called global reset that central bankers around the world, especially the World Economic Forum, have been discussing a lot recently, and there is not really going to be any reset. The reset they're speaking of is the U.S. central bankers' plan, although of course they're not going to spell it out like I'm spelling it out here, but it's their plan to crash the U.S. dollar and eventually U.S. stock markets after they give ample time and warning to all their parasitic friends to exit the market, while they ensure to continue by the continued rise meme to retail investors, typically the marks in their plans, just as they did prior to the 2008 global financial crisis. So the plan has always been to completely crash the US dollar eventually, so that they may be able to usher in the new world order of 100% digital currency. Now, kind of piggybacking off of their end game, we saw all these news articles which are starting to condition us this past July as far as how the U.S. Central Bank would have to start rationing pennies, nickels, dimes, and quarters, and banks. They started to urge commercial banks to start to solicit their clients to bring more coins and turn them in for paper fiat currencies at the banks. Now, because there has been a coin deficit in America, they say there's a lot of retailers, restaurants, even very large retailers like Walmart that are basically saying you have to pay either exact change of whatever you purchase, which is absurd, or use digital currency like a credit card or debit card to pay for your purchase. Now, the U.S. Mint ironically said that it's been operating at, quote, full production capacity since mid-June, minting almost 1.6 billion coins during the month of June. And it says it expects to produce 1.65 billion coins per month for the rest of the year. Now, it said in 2019, it produced an average of 1 billion coins per month. So why are we having a coin shortage if their production is 60% greater than in 2019 and we didn't have a coin shortage in 2019? Something stinks to high heaven of this story. Now, interestingly enough, some retailers in America like Kroger and Stop and Shop are telling their customers, hey, if you're going to pay with cash, since we can't give you exact change, you're going to have to round up your total. So of course they never suggest, hey, why don't we round down your total? No, let's round up your total so you have to pay more to us. And then sure, we'll pay the extra to charities, what they say. And even through September 1st, there's a bank in Texas, Amarillo National Bank. I don't know, I'm pronouncing that like it should be because Amarillo means yellow, but given that's in Texas, God knows how that's pronounced. Maybe it's Amarillo National Bank. Is paying an extra, they said 10% up to $500 cash for those customers that bring their coins in exchange for cash. So they're willing to pay you 10% more than the coins you bring in. So why does a bank need coins? Who's coming in and asking the bank for coins? Am I missing something here? It sounds like the same kind of demonetization plan rolled out by that snake and rat Narendra Modi to India when he tried to confiscate gold from private Indian citizens. Now, it has always astounded me why so many Indians love Narendra Modi, because if you look at his financial actions, he has done everything that has harmed Indians. So there must be some other political policies as far as why he's so beloved, because it's so obvious that he's a rat and a snake working for the parasitic banking class against the best interests of all Indian citizens. So why he is so beloved is still a mystery to me. But then again, I don't know a lot about Indian politics, so there must be some other political reason why Indian citizens love him so much, since he has always worked against their best interests from a financial standpoint. Now, he rolled out a plan, of which I'm going to put the link to the article in the show notes above, that I wrote back in November 5th of 2015, or November 9th, in which he was rolling out what he called, as a snake, a gold monetization plan. Even though if you read the details, he was urging Indians to bring their physical gold into bank in exchange for a paper contract, which he called a gold bond. So that is obviously a gold demonetization plan, but being the snake he is, he called it a gold monetization plan. And knowing from my knowledge of Indian culture, that's a very patriarchal society, not a matriarchal society, in which men make all the financial decisions, in fact, all the decisions for the family. He likely knew he couldn't fool the men into making such stupid decisions as turning into the physical gold over to the state in exchange for paper, even though he called it a gold monetization plan. It was a gold demonetization plan. So their plan was to get as much of the 20,000 tons, that's correct, 20,000 tons. Remember, the United States only owns 8,133 tons, supposedly, at Fort Knox and other of their deep gold vaults for the people of America, held by the U.S. Treasury, or owned by the U.S. Treasury. Although I believe that number is probably half or even less, meaning like 4,000 tons or less. But Indian citizens own 20,000 tons of gold, or at least those are the estimates. So Modi was trying to bring and call all the gold back in and give people worthless paper in return. And he said, look, if you get a 12 to 15-year-old bond, I'm going to pay you 2.5% interest per year. Now, the year he rolled out that plan, spot gold was $1,090. Now, I know all paper gold products are always tied to the spot price, not to the physical gold price. So I doubt his gold bonds were tied to the physical gold price. So that means even though gold was in a bearish trend back then, so the premiums for gold coins were not nearly as high as they are now over the spot price. So they were closer to $25 or so over the spot price. So the spot price was $1,090. So you could have bought Canadian maple leaves for around $1,115 or so, as far as the best prices you could get back then. But he was probably talking about 2.5% per interest off of the spot gold price. And I didn't go read those contracts, so I'm not even sure that 2.5% per year was compounding. But let's give it the benefit of the doubt and say it was compounding. If you compounded 2.5% per year off that spot gold price, by July of, or really the end of June, because I did a half a year, 2020. By the end of June of 2020, guess what you would have now? Guess what your gold bond would be worth? It would be worth $1,223. I know dollars is not the currency, but I'm just speaking about that for the sake of simplicity. Whatever the rupee rate is, it's going to be the same, right? So you would have approximately a 12% gain. Now, remember I said he could not fool men probably, so he tried to appeal to women and say, hey, look at my gold bonds. This is a way of empowering women. He said that, quote, this will empower women in India. So he's trying to appeal to women to sell their gold to the bank in exchange for paper. And like I said, that scheme would only have yielded a 12% gain. Now, had you kept, say, your physical gold coins, and I know back then when I was still running my gold, and silver and precious metal consulting company, that I had a handful of Indian clients that purchased gold coins. And you know what the appreciation rate, because a Canadian gold silver maple leaf 1 ounce is selling right now for $2,050. So we're talking you could have an 84% profit if you have physical gold, or if you listen to that Snake Modi, you don't have a 12% gain. So think about, for every ounce, we're talking possibly tens of thousands of dollars of difference in profit. And back then, if you think I'm just saying this in hindsight, I will put the link to my article, go read it. On November 9th, 2015, I said, all Indians, do not fall for this scheme from the Snake Modi, because you're going to be crying buckets years down the road if you believe he is trying to help you like he says he is. Yeah, I'm trying to help all you guys because I love you. You're my citizens. I told you back then that he was just going to try to steal the only asset that would preserve your wealth from you and give you worthless paper in return. So that, of course, turned out to be exactly correct. Now let's move on to the point when I was saying, where I was speaking of, if you look through all financial news through a national lens, you will do the exact opposite of what you should do to protect yourself in preparation for the second phase of this global financial crisis that started. Remember, the US stock market crashed to start this year in 2020, but then was basically saved by trillions of dollars of creation of fiat currencies out of thin air that was given to all the commercial banks in the United States through the overnight repurchase market, and as well as being pumped into the stock market. So this has been temporarily delayed. It hasn't been reversed, it's been temporarily delayed. And the reason I say this is because I see a lot of people looking through political stories through a nationalistic lens, and not really through the lens of what is right and what is wrong and what is truthful, and just having truth as their moral compass, but have nationalism as their moral compass, which of course you're not going to have a moral compass if you look at everything through a nationalistic lens. So because, you know, there are biases of the political parties that try to demonize other foreign entities and to always say our country is doing what is correct. And this applies to India, Russia, Argentina, Venezuela, America, Canada. I don't care what country. This applies to all countries around the world. Now, what I see, and if you process political news through this lens, you're definitely going to process financial news through this lens. Now, what I see right now happening, as I discussed in the financial news of the Horrific and Parasitic in podcast number 116, with the deforestation of 15 million hectares of rainforest every year, probably giving way to more global warming than even coal plants or other things related to carbon credit taxation enforced by the parasitic ruling class, but they won't speak about the global warming effect of the destruction of rainforests all around the world, because they're the ones profiting off of the massive destruction of rainforests. So they just push that to the side, pretend it's not even happening, pretend it doesn't contribute greatly to global warming and also to flooding, because it's just simple logic, right? If there's all this deforestation going on, there's less plants to consume the carbon dioxide. So there's much less carbon dioxide uptake, because rainforests are one of the greatest processors of carbon dioxide in the entire world. And also because there's much less absorption of rain from vegetation and trees once they get cut down. So there's a lot more flooding due to less barriers to unimpeded water flow. So, for example, in Thailand in 2004, when there was that Boxing Day tsunami that happened on December 26th, one of the main reasons that tsunami was so destructive for a lot of the island resorts and caused far more human death and tragedy than necessary was because the resort developers destroyed the mangrove forests that bordered the beaches, that protected the inland communities. So once they destroyed all the mangrove forests that would have slowed down that tsunami wave, it just rolled right in and smashed through all those islands. So as well, what is going on right now in China is that the Three Gorges Dam, right? Environmentalists have said that this would cause massive flooding when it was first developed, because there was a lot of land reclamation projects that bottlenecked the natural waterways of the Yangtze River, at the Yangtze, Yellow, and Wai rivers. So what was predicted is back then, when the Three Gorges Dam was built, is happening, and it's disingenuous of the Chinese government to blame it on heavy seasonal rainfall. So that may be a contributor, but since it was predicted that these things that are happening right now would happen many, many years ago when that project was being built, then again, those are really the primary reasons why all this flooding is happening. So that dam project received a ton of criticism, when it was launched, because like that someone said in that Hollywood movie, The Italian Job, for those of you that's seen that movie, there are three mothers no one should ever F with. One, Mother Nature; two, mother-in-laws; and three, mother effing Ukrainians. So if you mess with Mother Nature and bottleneck and stifle its natural waterways, of course rivers are going to flood so easily. And now what they're saying is that the flooding is so heavy in China that you're going to have to either make a choice. You're going to have to save Chongching, which I believe is a city of 12 million. No. More than that. I think 25 million citizens. It's a huge citizen. That's like a village, like in other nations. But in China, where there's probably more than their stated 1.4 billion population, probably closer to 1.6 or 1.7, 25 million is like just another city. And so they said they're either going to have to, that's upstream from the dam, or downstream is Wuhan. We all know Wuhan from the coronavirus. So they said they're going to have to make a choice, save one or the other. Or if they choose to save both of them, then they're going to have to really destroy a lot of smaller regional cities and villages along the way. So really, that the fact that there are a lot of people out there, I see comments, well, good for them, because this whole economic war going on between the US and China. So many Americans that say, oh, that's karma, they're getting what they deserve. That is ludicrous to demonize all Chinese people, because number one, they have nothing to do with the actions of the hardline government. And number two, millions of them, millions of people that are suffering are good people. Farmers whose entire crops have been destroyed. Thousands who have lost their homes that are poor and don't have the financial capacity to rebuild their homes. So I think it's really dangerous when we embrace national exceptionalism narratives and buy into our parasitic leaders' demonization of entire races of people. And consequently, we say in response to these humanitarian tragedies, F them, they deserve it. Which is all you need to do is go to YouTube and type in a search for Chinese flooding, and you'll see all these comments saying, about the worst floods in China in 30 years. Other articles say it's the worst in 70 years. But a lot of people in the West have bought so much into their government's demonization of Chinese people that so many people in the West are engaging in schadenfreude and just reveling, celebrating the misery and suffering of hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of innocent people. And I think that's extremely dangerous to do, to completely lose our humanity and to not see other races as human. Because you can only do that if you don't see other races as being human. In addition, I want to emphasize, because I'm not taking hours to discuss these issues and sometimes discussing very complex issues in just about 10 minutes, that I'm not going to flush out issues as fully as they deserve, but the West also tends to demonize the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, like it's comparable to, hardline Russia during Cold War times, because while there are hardline CCP members that wish to surveil and control Chinese citizens and definitely are boot stomping upon the freedoms of their people, it was estimated in 2011 that nearly 6% of the Chinese population, remember we're talking about 1.6, 1.7 billion people, are members of the CCP. So obviously this entire demonization even of the CCP includes a lot of normal, compassionate people. They're all not hardliners. And to this day, this estimate has grown from 2011 to 2020 that nearly 10% of the Chinese population is a member of the CCP. So at 1.6 billion, do you really think that 160 million people are evil people? Because obviously of those, there are tens and 20s and 30s of millions of people. They're just regular people. Farmers, doctors, engineers, architects, teachers, and so on, people just like you and me. And there's no way the majority of these people are evil people. And if you ever visited China, you would know that on the surface. Because, I said I visited China several times, spent extended stays there, and had no problem with a lot of the Chinese people. They're the same as humans everywhere. And they even understand that a lot of their freedoms are being restricted by hardline members of their Communist Party. So they're even more aware than a lot of Westerners of how their freedoms are being really, stomped on and so forth. So again, their major cities are every bit as modern as Los Angeles, Buenos Aires, Montreal, any other modern city in the world, Christchurch. And in fact, probably more modern than many of these cities, because they, as you probably know, you've seen those videos where there's construction, those massive skyscrapers go up in just like a few weeks. Their new cities have been built much more recently. So even in China, we're not speaking of a Cold War-like communist party that exists, but it's far more of a blend between communism and capitalism, but probably has the worst aspects of both, right? The worst aspects of communism and the worst aspects of capitalism that also plague America. But even so, many regular people support the CCP in China because it's the CCP's initiatives that have brought a massive part of their citizens out of poverty into the middle class. So that's why so many regular citizens became members of the CCP. Because think about it, if you were dirt poor and within like a couple of decades, all of a sudden you're part of the middle class. You see that. You go from being a parent and dirt poor to your child growing up, and now you say, oh my God, my child has so much of a better life, and they're middle class or upper middle class. Of course you're going to support the party that was responsible for this massive economic transformation. So again, almost every other developed nation in the world, well, I wouldn't call China developed yet, but more like a developing nation, but every other developed nation in the world is going backwards economically, in which the 0.1 to 1% of the wealthiest people are greedily transferring all the wealth of the middle class to themselves like leeches and pushing the middle class into poverty. So if developed nations had the middle class growth rate of China, there wouldn't be even this economic war going on. There wouldn't be this racial hostility going on, because everyone knows a strong middle class is necessary for a strong economic and sustainable country, and no developed nation has a strong, robust middle class anymore. So good times foster happiness and satisfaction. What do bad economic times foster racial hatred, prejudice, bias, and basically a lack of humanitarian beliefs. So, but back to the floods, because heavy rains now have basically plagued 27 of China's 31 provinces since June, and it's affected more than 37 million people, left 141 dead, which I probably think is a severe underestimation, because, like I said, the Chinese government never likes to convey the truth and tell us what's, they always will minimize the destruction that's going on. So I find it hard to believe that only 141 people have died from these floods, and economic losses have been estimated about 12.3 billion US dollars so far. So by comparison, there was a great flood in the US. If you're American watching this, you may remember 1993 along the Mississippi and Missouri rivers, and back then it was called one of the most costly, devastating floods ever seen and experienced in the US, but that only resulted in 50 deaths, 54,000 people being evacuated, and economic losses were put at 15 billion to 20 billion. So thus far, that outpaced the economic damage estimated in China, but this is going to be ongoing for a while. So again, I think it's very dangerous for us to channel how we analyze everything through a very narrow spectrum of nationalism, because as I said, I'm going to go back and even I'm going to talk about the real truth of what's going on, because Sweden has been a complete success because it was based upon a science-based response to COVID-19. And there's a lot of charts that I posted actually on a Zero Hedge post dated July 30th. So go find it, called, what did I call it? When there's something called like when economic failure comes, we go to war. So, or when economic failure sets in, we go to war. So just go check it out. If not, I'll make a podcast, because I'll make an audio podcast of that particular article. That'll probably be numbered like SK Wealth Academy podcast number 120, 120, 120, in the 120s somewhere, in the early 120s. So if you want to wait till then, you can just listen to it. But for those of us that might be British, Canadian, American, even, if you live in the EU, but another European country like Germany, you're not getting the truth if you're actually not going to the public health agency of Sweden and looking at the actual data, because the entire mass media is blacking out the tremendous success of their scientific-based response, in which the least amount of economic damage in the entire world to developed economy is ongoing in Sweden, because they never shut down their economy. And also, they have one of the best responses since June as far as rapidly tailing off the number of infections and the number of deaths. And the number of deaths under people, this is one thing people don't know, because they all look just at the number of deaths. Like the greatest number of deaths among the people that died from coronavirus is above 80 years old, and even above 90 years old. Above 90 years old. So the number of deaths from people that were aged 60 or under is almost non-existent. In fact, the mortality rate is less, significantly, 3 times less than the mortality rate from the flu, from the common flu. And this is what people don't know. That's why I say it's been such a great success in Sweden. But again, that's all in that article, so I don't want to really talk about this, and I'm going to make a separate podcast on this. So if you want, just wait to podcast number 120, 121, 122, or so on. And if you want to join me on patreon.com and help support me, because for this entire year I have received 0 advertising revenue from all my podcasts, all my news articles on my news site malamalama.com/WordPress, and basically all the free content I've been publishing. I've not received a single pence for anything. So you could really help me out by going to support me for just the price of a cup of coffee for $5 a month on patreon.com/SK Wealth Academy if you've been enjoying these podcasts. So thanks so much for your support. Very blessed to have my global community that does support me. I hope you stay safe, stay strong through this economic lockdown. Remember, work out daily, eat right, because those are the 2 best ways to avoid any serious reaction from COVID-19. Not to be locked down, but to get in your daily physical exercise and to eat properly. Okay, so thanks so much for watching, and as always, remain intensely curious. So long.